It is estimated that for 95% of human history, we worked an average of 15 hours a week. Doesn't that sound nice? And that work was very fluid, flexible, in tune with nature, and leveraged our most human skills and abilities. And then about 250 years ago, the Industrial Revolution turned work into something much more rigid and robotic. In the early industrial days, there were no evenings or weekends, no vacation days or sick leave. Those who showed up were paid for the hours that they worked, and those who didn't were replaced. During this period, it was not uncommon for people to work 100 hours a week. But workers didn't really like that arrangement, and over time, they fought back. In 1817, a Welsh labor rights activist named Robert Owen came up with the idea of splitting the day into 3 equal parts: 8 hours for work, 8 hours for sleep, 8 hours for recreation. That idea did not catch on for another 100 years. Around that same time, a group of Christian fundamentalists successfully lobbied the American government to close the post office on Sundays so that workers could attend church. Jewish workers were instead given Saturdays to accommodate their Sabbath, but the Christian groups didn't really like that anybody was going to work on Sunday, whether or not they actually were Christian. So to settle the matter, a New England mill is believed to be the first to start offering both Saturdays and Sundays off in 1908. But the first major American industrialist to adopt this schedule was Henry Ford. In 1922, he adopted this 40-hour work week that we know today on a trial basis and only made it permanent in 1926, 100 years ago. But it was still considered very controversial at that time. In fact, the American government did not update its Fair Labor Standards Act to codify the 40-hour work week, essentially making it the law of the land, until the year 1940. But that's also not the end of the story. In 1956, then Vice President Richard Nixon said that we would have a 4-day work week in the very near future, thanks to his administration's economic policies. We are, of course, still waiting for that future to arrive. Just a couple of years ago, independent Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders proposed a bill to change the work week to 32 hours, effectively making the 4-day work week the new law of the land. And we've seen governments all over the world, from Iceland to Japan to Portugal, trying to implement a similar change. But if history is any guide, change is most likely to originate in, the laws are only likely to be amended after there is sufficient private sector adoption. And that's where my friend Joe comes in.
Back in 2018, I led a research project analyzing working time and productivity in the Irish public sector. And what we discovered was that we had a lot of working parents, mostly women, who had opted to reduce their work time, often to a 4-day schedule, with an equivalent reduction in salary. But what we also found was that their job expectations and responsibilities had not adjusted in kind, nor had their performance. And that's when I discovered the concept of Parkinson's Law, which is the idea that work will expand so as to fill the time that's available for its completion. In other words, give someone 40 hours to complete a task, and they'll get it done in 40. Challenge someone to achieve the same outcome in 32 hours, and they will find new and better and more efficient ways to get the work done. In fact, we know from the OECD data that often the world's most productive economies work the fewest hours, and vice versa. Since 2018, I've been leading 4-day workweek pilot programs all over the world, involving organizations from all kinds of different shapes, sizes, and industries in the UK and Ireland, in Australasia, and right here in North America. Working with research partners from Boston College, University College Dublin, and Cambridge University, we now have hundreds of case studies involving tens of thousands of workers that demonstrate that not only is it possible to get the same amount of work done in less time, but it can actually dramatically improve a range of different outcomes.
Since the Industrial Revolution, we have been measuring productivity in hours, which is a really effective way to measure output on an assembly line when people are doing the same thing over and over again, but not so much in our modern knowledge economy. These days, there's a lot of different ways to fill an hour at work, and not all of them contribute equally to the bottom line.
We have a couple of audience questions around this, that AI is one of the key potential drivers of this. So how exactly do you see, like, what kind of things can AI step in and do? And in particular, an audience question that's interesting to me here is that, you know, in the age of AI, when you have competing AI agents that can do 24/7 work with no burnout or exhaustion, how do you compete against that?
Well, the way you compete is by doing the things that AI can't better than your competitors. So, as we try to articulate in the presentation in the book as well, in the age of AI, doing the same thing that AI can do fast as you possibly can is just not going to get you anywhere. We are once again, as we try to articulate, returning to a world where we're once again prized for our most human traits, the things that the robots and machines cannot do on our behalf. And we argue that, first of all, one thing that I found very interesting when we were doing the book that I didn't expect was that the sheer amount of AI resistance that's out there. And Joe quoted some stats in our presentation, but employees are actively sabotaging their organization's efforts to introduce AI because they don't want to train the robot replacements. And the organizations that flip the script and say, hey, if you can use this tool effectively, you can share in the reward by having some time off, are having significantly more success. And there's lots of data around that we include in the book. They're having more success integrating the AI. And then where the gaps are in the workforce in terms of what's left for the human workers, a lot of those things, again, they're leveraging our most human traits. And those human skills are most effective when we are not stressed out, when we're not struggling to balance our work lives and our home lives, when we're focused on the task at hand. And both of those things are helped by a shorter work week.
I think if you think about any of us in the room who are a knowledge worker, so that could be consultants, writers, academics, where our value typically has been based on the information that we hold, our expertise, our experience. The reality is that information is, it has already become very commodified. And so in that world, the value of that knowledge is greatly diminished. We don't think that that's going to mean that the knowledge worker is no longer going to be important, but what it's going to mean is the value is going to shift to things like curiosity. So in a world of infinite answers, the ability to ask the right questions becomes more important. Curation. Why does the wine sommelier still exist when access to wine information is so easy? It's because of the way they present and curate that information in a way that adds value. Judgment. How do you make good decisions based on that information? So that's the kind of future that we see happening. But very quickly on the more existential question, we have Bill Gates in the book. Jared interviewed him. He's got some quotes about his thoughts on the 4-day work week. But to kind of spoil the surprise a little bit, Bill Gates has gone on the record saying he thinks that not just a 4-day work week, but a 2 or a 3-day work week is going to come about at some point in the future as a result of AI. The question we need to ask ourselves, though, is his version of a shorter work week one where, like we've described, people earn the same salary, are in the same employment, and work less? Or is it one where either the state has to step in and subsidize the remainder of people's income, or where maybe lower skilled workers have to work multiple jobs in order to be able to bring about the same income? So I think that is the choice that is before us as a society. And something like a 4-day work week can help not only share the benefits with the workforce, but actually also smooth the transition in some of those industries that are going to be the most affected.